Welcome to the Existential Empath Podcast. My name is Tanya, and I am an intuitive empath. My intention is to share valuable tips, tools, and techniques that I have learned so you can tap into your own inner healer naturally and intuitively. Welcome back, everyone. Today I have guest Vanessa Alfaro. Vanessa is an anger and communication coach who turned her rageful, traumatic upbringing into what inspires her to do what she does today. While she was once ashamed of her rage, she now believes anger and rage are opportunities for deep healing. Vanessa developed a revolutionary process that changed and saved her life called the anger algorithm. For her, it was the solution she needed to release bottled up rage that has been carrying on with her in her entire life. Vanessa now works with people all over the world, helping them transform their anger into empowered conversations by teaching the anger algorithm. Welcome, Vanessa. It's such a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Hi, Tanya. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about our conversation and what you're going to ask.
It's going to be a lot of fun today. So,
yeah.
You know, some of us grow up seeing anger and rage as normal emotions, right? By observing our parents or our peers or even our teachers for that matter. And oftentimes we learn how to deal with our anger in unhealthy ways by lashing out, suppressing our feelings, or even worse, acting out our anger on others or even animals for that matter. And so I call this the pressure cooker effect. It's when, we bottle things up so much inside that at some point we have to release it, right? We have to allow that energy to release. So you and I are going to talk about anger, the misunderstood emotion, and we're going to dive into the deeper meaning behind anger and rage. And so I wanted to start off briefly with both of our stories because I do think it's important for people to see that everyone experiences anger and rage, and there is nothing to be shameful about when we are processing and working through these different emotions. And so, Vanessa, I want you to start off with just telling us briefly about your story on how you have experienced anger and rage to a point where you knew you needed to seek help or find inner guidance on how to heal and transform those emotions.
Yeah. So, I was born into a rageful family on both sides of my parents, my mother and father's side. So I grew up around rageful adults and it was intense. And this is something that, I suppressed my anger and rage, but then I would have an explosive rageful outbursts. So it's been with me my entire life. And it's something that I've worked on. Believe me, I've been, meditation, yoga, exercising, dancing, all of it, you name it, to really try to manage and control my anger and rage. And ultimately, though, it would come out in my most intimate relationships. I have some sort of destructive, rageful outbursts. And I was really scared of my rage. I was really afraid of it. I didn't, because it was so destructive and I could be so intense energetically. And so it was in my marriage where, I had to still work on my rage because at the beginning of the relationship, it was an issue. And my husband at the time really wanted to work it out with me. And so we did the work. I did the work. And so I really dove into Zen meditation practice to really nurture my awareness. And it was in my meditation practice where I started realizing all the moments I would suppress anger, particularly at work. So what happened over time was that I just realized I was holding back in my life. My body, I felt it in my body. It was my body that was telling me something's not right. And I actually, in my 30s, I came down with an autoimmune disease. And I just had this level of exhaustion that just didn't feel normal. I thought, what is going on? And then I realized I am not expressing this wild, normal, part in me. And there, all the anger management, what that does, it's about controlling, or it's incomplete in some way, like just vent, but then what? Just breathe. And then what? And count to 10. And then what? So I started searching. I thought there has to be a way. There must be a way, because if it exists in nature, it exists in us. And so then I researched, and then I developed the anger algorithm. And as soon as I worked through the process and I worked through the steps, by the way, algorithm means a step-by-step logical process, but I knew it was the answer. I was like, this is it, because it, and I'll tell you more about it later, but it's so rich, the process, and it really guides you through the full expression of anger. And I would always come away with a tremendous amount of relief and clarity, so that I could then work through conflict.
Oh, that's so powerful. And I do want to talk about the anger algorithm. And, Vanessa, like you too, I experienced, that, and learning how to deal with my own anger and rage. And I didn't really grow up in a rageful environment, but it was chaotic at times for sure. But I was bullied tremendously as a kid, all the way through school. And so when I had to move through my anger and rage journey is when it started, was in college. And I had this one girl on my basketball team who just knew how to push my buttons just perfectly, right? And so I was bottling it up, like you talked about. It's like you just, you talked about at work, how you would bottle up your, all of that. And then you come home and have, an explosion. And that's how I was. I kept bottling up all of these, little life events that were happening to me, and I wasn't expressing them in a positive way. And so when she poked the bear, and all it took was that one little poke, I lashed out on her physically, and all I saw was black. I felt rage. I felt this tremendous amount of energy coming through me. And this was not my personality. I was a very kind of humble person. I would, not cause conflict and fights. But with that said, I was causing conflict and fight within myself, because I wasn't expressing myself like you talked about. And I think a lot of people do this. It reminds me of, if any of you have seen The Christmas Story, when Ralphie is getting bullied, yes, and then he just goes crazy on the kid. And that's how I felt in that particular moment. And, I look back at all those years of being bullied through grade school and up, and how I was suppressing, repressing, and, all of this. It was just building this pressure within inside of me. And it sounds like that's what was happening to you too, from an early age of childhood. And so, I look at our emotions like an onion, right? So we're just peeling away the layers of our emotions. And oftentimes anger is one of those top layers of the onion, because it's signaling, it's an emotional response to signaling deeper emotions underneath, like rejection or abandonment, or even trauma, for that matter, resentment, right? And so why is anger that misunderstood emotion? Why do people, misconstrue what anger is and how it bubbles to the surface?
Right. So I'll just ask you, perhaps now, but when you think of anger, what word comes to mind?
Rage. I mean, I do. When I think of anger, I think heat. I think hot. I think frustrated. I think, oh, I don't know. I guess when I think of anger, it's hard to think of a word. I think more of a color. I think more of a temperature.
Yeah. So it's hot. And you even showed it like, ugh, like, and I ask my participants in my workshops, my clients, when you think of anger, what comes to mind? Violence, shame, regret. I mean, it's often very negative. Emotions are neither negative or positive, but we have such a bad association with anger. And for many of us, we were never taught how to express intense emotions in a healthy way. Now, I know this is shifting generationally, but in my generation, it was often like you could not be really sad, and you could not be really angry. There had to be some sort of neutral ground with the adults who were raising me. So it's misunderstood because we don't know how to express it in a healthy way. Many of us were never taught that. And we don't understand the power of anger and actually what it reveals when you allow yourself to release this energy from your body. Anger is like, fear and anger go hand in hand, and it covers up and protects the most wounded places in us. And in those wounded places, when you can actually get to those places under the anger, to the more vulnerable feelings of sadness, I'm tired, I'm confused. When you get to those more vulnerable feelings, you're moving energy that may or may not help you access this place in you that needs healing. So it reveals to you in your body, in your heart, what needs to be healed. And when you can heal and release anger and rage, the relief that comes with it is amazing. Yeah. But you begin to access clarity. You begin to access your inner wisdom for what you really want. And you can start talking about why you're angry, and you'll start to work through conflict radically differently.
Absolutely. And I 100% agree with that. I know in my marriage, I was the pressure cooker. I would hold it all in and lash out like that. And so I think it's important what you're saying, because when we ground ourselves into our body and we actually feel that anger, and we can kind of strip away, where is that painful place? Where is that hurt that this anger is kind of putting a Band-Aid, over? And so how does anger lead into rage? What's the difference between anger and rage? And I guess, how does it lead into that point of rage? Because like I said, I saw black. It was almost like I blacked out when I got to that point. There was so much energy rushing through me, and that's a scary place to be in, right?
It is. And a lot of people are afraid. Because they feel it. And I often get, my clients will say, if I turn this valve on, I'm afraid it's never going to shut off. And then I'll just be in this black hole of feelings. So going back to your question, anger is a primary emotion. There are, several primary emotions out there, and anger is one of them. And it's really part of this, of like our ancestors, because it helped us survive. We used it to protect ourselves, our shelter, our family, and our food. So we needed it for many reasons, and we still use it as a form of protection. But anger is this primary emotion, and it's a wheelhouse of energetic feeling, right? So you can be mildly annoyed or irritated, or just fucking rageful, where you want to destroy. You want to fucking destroy something. So it's just it's the intensity with which you feel anger. And when I think of rage, which I had a lot of and so much of, and I was surrounded by adults who are rageful, it is extremely hostile and violent. And you feel like you want to kill someone. And of course, that's not what we want to do. And so many of us just hold it in and hold back because we don't want to go to that negative place. So that's the difference between the two. And the richness of it, though, is that you cannot stay in a rageful state. It's impossible. You can't.
It's exhausting.
It's right. It's exhausting. So there's a point where it moves. It moves through. It's literally our emotions. We are energetic beings. We are energy, full of energy. We are dynamic. We are vital. And our emotions are energy in motion. And they come and go, and they come and go. And we as humans spend so much fucking time fighting it, fighting sadness, fighting anger, we just spend so much time fighting it, and we end up feeling depleted and depressed. But we are like nature, and like the weather is changing. It comes and goes. Mother Nature is not in a constant storm state. We would not be here. So that it ends. It absolutely ends. And I'm proof that it ends because I'm here talking to you. I'm alive and healthy, healthier than I've ever been in my life. And my clients, you know, they move through it, and they're all, and when you move through the algorithm, you know, when you're done, your body's like, I'm done. And there's a tremendous sense of like relief, because it's that you finally have permission. You give yourself permission. I facilitate the process for my clients. And there's just this like, finally, I get to have this tantrum with somebody who is holding space for me.
Yeah.
It's relief.
Feeling
It's relieving.
safe. Yeah,
Yes.
feeling
Yes.
in a safe place that you can release that energy.
Yeah.
And that's
Yes.
imperative. And so, Vanessa, you know, how is anger an opportunity to transformationally heal? How, you know, when we actually finally sit down and say, all right, I'm angry. Okay. How do we heal through that?
So for me, being very conscious, making a mindful, conscious, mature decision. I am angry right now. I am so upset, and I have this tool, and I'm going to work through it. The algorithm, the entire process and working through it is what is healing, because what happens in the process is you begin to start not just thinking, really listening to what you really want and what you really need and what that looks like. This is profound because many of us often put others first, particularly in our relationships. And if we're in the heterosexual dynamic of man and woman, we women put everybody before us. And so to really drop into what do I really want here, and then to embrace that is healing. Yeah. And then to ask for what you want, and because you're so clear what you want and what you need, not only, and this is what's also really healing, is we women, particularly in relationships, we really want to be cared for and supported. Mm-hmm. And it's so vulnerable for us to ask. It is so vulnerable. So when we're clear on what we want, not only is it empowering to ask and to talk about it, but we get to a place in the healing process where, yeah, our partner may not be able to give us everything we want, but because we are so clear in who we are and what we want, we take care of ourselves in a very different way. Yes. Very different. And we begin to really nurture ourselves and love ourselves extremely motherly and fatherly, instead of the constant, I'm not enough, I'm not doing enough, until we're just like on the floor in tears, or just like, I can only sleep, and just barely taking care of ourselves. So it's a whole way of relating to self, which is healing.
Big time healing. You know, I grew up in a household where, you know, mom took on more masculine traits, where my dad took on the more passive traits. And so, you know, I kind of grew up with that concept of don't show your weakness, suck it up, you know, don't show your emotions. And so I love being able to talk about this because I'm not the only one who grew up in that type of environment, right? And so, you know, and then I was in sports. And so even in sports, it was like, brush it off, you know, or, you know, it was like you really had to put on this armor, so to speak. And, you know, so and then I carried that into every single interpersonal relationship I had. I carried it into my marriage. And, so Vanessa, let's talk about some of the reasons why anger creates issues within our relationships. Because I know you specifically work with women working on anger within their marriages. And so let's talk about that. And, maybe just on a general standpoint, it doesn't even have to be a marriage. It could be a friendship. It could be a dynamic with your parents. And, how does anger play a role in that? And what types of issues come to the surface in our relationships?
That's such a good question. So, when we don't express ourselves authentically, in a normal way to express anger. Well, first of all, let me back up. Many of us have really conditioned ourselves to not feel angry.
Yes.
I mean, it is deep, deep conditioning that goes way back, particularly with women. And so there's that. So it's often an automatic response to not feel angry. It's an automatic response to convince ourselves to not be angry. Oh, I shouldn't make a big deal out of it. Oh, I'm just being too sensitive. I'm not going to let him or her get to me. All of those are ways that we suppress anger.
Suppressants.
We suppress it. Or sometimes something happens and it's days later and you're like, I'm mad, but too much time has passed. So in all of our ways of suppressing, again, we're energy. This energy has to be expressed some way, and it often comes out destructively. Mm-hmm. So we might end up being passive aggressive, or we get to that point where we can't take it anymore, and then we have a rageful outburst, mm-hmm. and we just start a fight because we can't think. We're so angry. It might come out in avoidance. We're not talking. And if you're not talking in a relationship and you're not putting out what's on the table, it's going to show up in some nuanced, dysfunctional way. And it could be on a very subtle, energetic level. It could be disconnection. I don't feel close to my partner. Or it could be, I love him, yet I'm so fucking annoyed with him or her, or whoever the partner is. And I don't understand why, but I'm just going to ignore it. And so we try to do all these things to make it work. And we just don't really get to what's going on here. And then it becomes just exhausting. Mm-hmm. When really it's like just owning, you know what, I'm angry right now. And I'm going to work with my anger and I'm going to get to what's under it so that I can talk about what's bothering me in a very different way. So it comes out in many dysfunctional ways. And sometimes, maybe we're over-exercising, maybe overspending, or just doing something that we know isn't quite right, but it's just going to give us some sense of relief. So it comes out in many ways.
It does. And I think it's that soothing aspect. And that's how I was. I wasn't dealing with the anger, the issues in my marriage. So I was buying kitchen gadgets and things that filling up my pantry and, of all the loving home goods and, whatever, wherever I was at. But, I look back at that time and I'm like, gosh, I wasn't really expressing myself in a positive way. But I look back at my childhood and it was funny recently, over a year ago, I had to go home and stay with my parents for 8 months. And that was in itself a healing journey, but it gave me an opportunity to see how they interact with one another and what I grew up in. Right. And so just this, this dynamic between my parents really gave me some insight, like a reflection, back on, wow, that's what I looked like in my relationships, or that's what I looked like in my marriage. And it was a lot because I was programmed, to think that that's how I was supposed to act, in that dynamic. And so, but with that said too, you talked about autoimmune disease and how you started to get really sick because you were bottling up all of this stuff. And that's what happened to me too. I had such severe back pain, fibromyalgia, all these things that were coming up that I did not realize at the time. My bottled up emotions were bubbling all this stuff up to the surface. So let's talk about that, Vanessa. How does anger impact our body and our ability to think and communicate? Because it's not just an emotion that affects us, by lashing out or however we release it, but it can actually manifest in the physical, within our body. So let's talk about that too.
Absolutely. So it all goes back to energy, and the anger algorithm is very dynamic in that you do work with your body. I definitely have you work with your body. It can, depending on your comfort level and just where you will meet yourself where you are and how you express anger, but it's physical. So as you know, we have our chakras, right? So from our root to the crown of our head, our torso is so vital. It is a mystery, and it is full of organs, and just everything is just running. But what happens is that when our chakras are blocked, which means stuck, stagnant energy in the body, those blocked chakras, that blocked stagnant energy, you better believe it's going to cause some sort of disease or illness or something. Depression, when you don't have flow in your being, in your body. And so anger, if you are not releasing this energy, anger is powerful energy.
It is.
And when you are not releasing it, and I was not releasing it, I was like a closet rager. I was not releasing this powerful energy in me. That gets stuck in your body, and it will wreak havoc. It will wreak havoc. And I know, like, everybody's like, well, this is going to cause disease and that's going to cause disease. And I believe that,
there's a lot of things that cause disease.
Absolutely. I think it's all of it. And I believe that our emotions are one of the biggest components to disease and illness in our bodies.
I agree with you 100%. I mean, being an EFT tapping and emotion code practitioner, I work with the emotional body all the time. And, our organs carry certain emotions, like the liver carries anger, right? There's a reason why people say you're an angry drunk, and, alcohol hits the liver hard, and that's where it brings up that anger and that suppression. And, so there's links to things that we say and how we kind of create that, within our physical body. So, let's dive into the anger algorithm. What is the anger algorithm? I want to learn more. I'm excited about this. And how do we help people with the anger algorithm?
Yeah. So I'll give you an overview because it does need to be facilitated, and it can be done you can do it on your own. It is possible, but it does require facilitation. So I'll give you an overview of it. And like I said, algorithm means a step-by-step logical process. And so this is actually a logical step-by-step process, emotionally logical process to help you work through it. And so it involves writing out what it is that you want, and it's very guided. It involves writing out what you're triggered by, what your ego is saying, all those judgments and thoughts, why you're angry. And it helps you get to the more vulnerable emotions so that you can tap into what it is that you need and want. Mm-hmm. And then so that you get really clear about your requests. The algorithm is done privately. You don't want to do it with someone. You don't want to, if you're angry in the moment, the best thing to do, take a deep breath and you say, I'm angry right now. And I need space. I cannot talk right now. And then you go work through the algorithm. So it's done privately. You write out every step, and then you go somewhere to read what you wrote out loud as a way to move the energy. So the writing and the expression of it out loud moves the energy. And you can get, again, the venting is up to you. Like, you can get as wild and loud as you want, or however you express it. If you need to hit something, and again, this is done alone, you can go there and just know and trust that that venting will end, but you have to work through the other steps. You want to move through the full expression of anger, because you want to get to that place, the nugget of where your heart is really hurting. Mm-hmm. So that's the gist of it. And my work is rooted in nonviolent communication. So that's very embedded in the process. And yeah, it's just a beautiful frame. It's very dynamic because you tune into your body. So you're with your body. And then you're just constantly coming back and checking in with your feelings. You're listening. There's a meditative component to it too. You're listening to your inner wisdom. And sometimes some clients really struggle with that. Say, I just don't know what I want. I don't hear anything. But the beautiful thing about this process is, as you keep working through the algorithm, you keep clearing, and then you'll get to that clarity. And what I always find is that what had them trigger seemed so convoluted and intense and confusing. And by the time you get through the process, it's very clear on what you need.
Oh, I love that. And I love that you do it alone. So you're not like misdirecting your anger at someone else who's, your spouse or, your boss or, whoever. So is it best to do the algorithm in the moment when you're angry, or does it work after, when you're not in that heated moment of anger?
Anytime. You can, yeah. So if you're in the middle of conflict or something really intense, you can go somewhere, set some time aside for yourself. Or if you can't deal with it in that moment because so many other things are going on, we have such busy lives, then you go back and you work through it and you make some time for yourself. And my work is very introspective. You learn a lot about yourself, and this is about you. This is so much about you, and you're getting to know yourself on a very deep level, tapping into what you want. And it really is where you're paying so much attention to yourself. You start to develop a self-love and care that's unlike anything you've ever experienced.
Yeah. And it's really going back to that inner child and giving your inner child a big old hug, because that little child is angry and upset and has been carrying it forever. How long you've been carrying that pain, that hurt, that rejection, that guilt, whatever it is. And so, allowing yourself that time to go back and really, like I said, peel away the layers of the onion to see, where is that anger started? Where did it start? What is the root cause of my pain? And how have I let that wound fester long enough just to get to a point of rage, and, not everyone experiences rage and gets to that extent of anger, but, this sounds like it's even helpful for people who have a little bit of anger, because not everyone is angry and, blowing their lids off, all the time. And there could be times in our lives where we feel more anger than others. I know I felt very chaotic and angry in my marriage. I felt controlled. I felt trapped. I felt like I couldn't use my voice. And so had I had this tool back then, this would have been very dynamic for me in that relationship. And, or even in that relationship with work, a work environment, you can really apply this algorithm to that. It really sounds like it can be applied to anything, any area in your life. And so, how does it help people release or relieve anger in their most meaningful, closest relationships? Is it good to have the anger algorithm for both? Like, say, you and your spouse, so that way you're like, listen, we're having a tough time. We're having a conflict right now. We're screaming at the top of our lungs. And, I'm going to take a step aside. I know I had to take anger management classes after that little debacle in college. And so the one thing I learned from that was take a deep breath, say, I am angry, I need some space. That was probably the one thing I learned the most. But is it beneficial for each of you to know the algorithm and to be able to separate at that time and say, you go off do your thing, I'm going to go off do my thing, and we'll come back together and have a meaningful conversation?
Absolutely. The algorithm, anyone can use it. And I've worked with men and women, and anyone can use it. And you can use it for any relational dynamic. I had a client once who said, I used the algorithm on a squirrel. A goddamn squirrel got into my garage and created a mess, and I used the algorithm on the squirrel. And it's like, yes.
See, it's all energy, and you can use it any way that you can, or any way that you want. I love that. And I love how you said you write it down and then speak it, because when we speak, we release energy. It's our broadcast system. It's our amplifier, right? So it's so important to not only use the movement when you're writing. You're using both hemispheres of the brain, because you're using your hand, but you're also using your mind to think, right? So you're using both hemispheres, and then to speak it, it's like, you're releasing that energy.
Yes.
So that's so important.
Yes. And one of the things that will come up, because when I demonstrate the algorithm, I'll give an example, and I will actually show my clients, workshop participants, my rage. And it is out there. It is out there. And, and the thing is, I have so many thoughts coming through right now. It's not like, if it wasn't like I was getting angry all over the place. It's just I would have these intense outbursts in the most private, intimate relationships at home, and they were devastating. So a lot of this work is for anyone, because many of us were not taught how to express anger in a healthy, mature way. So it doesn't matter whether you kind of get angry, like everyone could benefit from this work. Even if you get, irritated and annoyed, or it doesn't matter. And the healing, what I also want to speak to what you said earlier, is that your inner child is part of the angry energy, right? Many of us have at one time or another, we could not be angry with our parents. It often was not okay. So what did we do as children? We figured out some way to manage and
Took it
survive.
out on some other poor kid at school.
Exactly.
Right?
Take it out, or whatever we did, or act it out, or do whatever. But when you really start working with your anger and rage, it's inevitable. Like, your inner child healing will start happening, because part of the venting it is like a tantrum. So you're saying things that you would never say to your beloved or to your colleague, because you think, wow, it's so immature. But you can't help it, but that your inner child is integrated into that. So there's that. And then, and one of the things that has come up a lot in my workshops is, so like I was saying earlier, I cuss. I have no problem calling somebody a fucking bitch and you fucking asshole. Like, I don't care. And a lot of participants will say, wow, you're putting out all that negative energy into the universe. So first of all, that comes from a belief, right? Like, well, what will happen if I put out all that negative energy into the universe? Am I going to be punished? Will I get in trouble? Is karma going to come back and haunt me? So the thing about the algorithm is that it gets you to a place where you start talking about what you want. And that comes from a place of love. Mm-hmm. And then not only that, you get to a place where you can actually put yourself in the other person's shoes and imagine what they might be feeling and needing, which shows compassion. So there's so much light and love and positivity that comes out of this. So it's not just like about putting out negative energy into the world and, you know, cussing somebody out. In fact, it's never really about the person anyway. Like,
No,
it
it's
really
not.
isn't.
Mm-mm.
It's really about you.
Mhm.
So it's like an invitation to let your ego have its way, release the judgments, the opinions, all the gunk that keeps you spiraling and looping in your anger. Release it so that you can get to what the divine wants for you, which is what you want from your heart. And that, to me, is like, it's so much goodness and light, and that in that you can bring that to actually working through conflict, and what that does to our world and to your home and the energy field. I mean, yeah, I'm okay calling somebody a fucking bitch if I can come to my light and say, you know what? I really understand you were having a hard time, and I have compassion for you, and I have compassion for myself. It's just, yeah.
And the thing is if the person who on the receiving end, who's receiving that energy, if they're in a space in their heart too, they can actually honor that and say, okay, that's not me. That's not me. That's your energy that you're letting the fuse out of, and or letting that pressure cooker, blow. And so it really is, it's just holding space. And I think as we expand our consciousness, we become more aware of that directed energy, and like you said, it's all a belief system. And if we choose to hold on to someone calling us a bitch or, whatever it may be, that's our energy on that. We're holding on to that versus just releasing it and realizing that, that's something that Vanessa's working through, and that's something that she's moving her energy through. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's my identity, and so it really is just energy. And I think when we actually wrap our minds around every single thing in our environment, every single thing in our reality is based off of energy, it makes our lives so much easier because we don't take things personally.
Yes. Yeah. It's just, it's okay. It's okay to embrace this dark part in you, because in the dark matter is the gem. It's the dissolving of the dark matter, this darkness in me. Yeah, I'm a fucking wild, violent, rageful woman. And so that my light can shine. And I'm willing to do that. And what's so beautiful in this work too is that the things that used to trigger me, the intensity of that is just a lot of things. Yeah, it dissolves away. It's just, I'm patient. I'm more patient. I'm more compassionate. I'm more understanding. I'm just more of everything else that brings contentment into my life. Yeah.
And I think as we release these emotions layer by layer, we begin to realize, like you said, what used to trigger us doesn't necessarily trigger us anymore, because we are now moving through the releasing of that energy and those emotions that we've been carrying for so long, and often caring for others,
Yes.
I mean, it's like I would watch, my mom, she grew up in an environment where they didn't have a healthy way of releasing their anger. So I kind of watched her lash out on my dad at times, and then my dad hold his tongue. And so I kind of learned to hold my tongue. And so, just visualizing our family dynamics and how we can carry on those lovely generational patterns. We have a choice. We have a choice now, in this now moment. Each and every one of us has a choice to change. We have a choice to shift. How do we deal with our relationships? Do we have constant conflict going on in our relationships? Do we fight with our boss all the time? Do we fight with our kids? What's going on? Let's take a step back and let's look at, number one, our upbringing. How are we taught? How are we taught to deal with conflict? How are we taught to express anger, rage? And then let's look at it. Is it healthy or unhealthy? Let's acknowledge that, and then let's move through it. Like tools like the anger algorithm. tools like EFT tapping, tools like, there's so many tools out there that we can use.
Yes.
Axe throwing, go throw some axes. Do what you
Yes.
have to do to move through that. And like you said in the beginning, you went through all these different steps and you're like, okay, that didn't work. That didn't work. This didn't work. You had to create something on your own, right? You actually had to create your own algorithm that worked for you. And now it's helping countless people to move through their anger. So, through our pain, through our suffering, through our hurt, we find our own healing journey, right? And then we have the opportunity to share it with others. And if they resonate, they do. And if they don't, they don't. That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so fascinating because many of us are in pain to some degree or another. We're depressed or anxious or afraid, particularly, with the pandemic and what that has brought up. And, or we're asleep. We're asleep in some way. We're just checked out. And, life is beautiful and it's challenging. And the thing is that so many of us are in pain, and yet we're doing things to achieve that happiness, to get out of our pain. And what a lot of us forget is like, no, let's move towards our pain. Let's just give ourselves permission to do some screaming, some yelling, some crying. And it brings so much relief. It brings so much relief, and we're afraid to do that. So you have to be willing. You have to be willing to make that choice. Our greatest power is choice. It is our greatest power. Yeah, I'm going to look at this and heal it, and I heal it. And I know it's going to be a little icky, but we come through it, and we can't. The only way out to the other side is to go through it. And there is another side. There is another side. And
it's lighter and it feels better.
It is.
We're on the other side. We can tell you, hey, everybody.
It is. And am I always on this side? No. No. Does the onion show another layer? Yes. And it gets easier. It gets easier and easier. And it's just like, it's a surrender to, this is life. This is the journey. This is the journey.
Absolutely. And, and when you have the tools to work through it, you'll work through it a lot faster. And when you're clearing the energy, when I look back 10 years ago, when I first started to clear the energy, it was a process. It took longer. Well, now I recognize when it bubbles to the surface, and I immediately, it's like, okay, I'm going to try these tools. I'm going to see what works for me. And I can work through it a lot faster than I could before. So we learn as we grow, and we learn as we move through our painful journeys, some of us, and so, Vanessa, I love this conversation because we've touched on a lot of topics that people don't want to talk about. People don't want to talk about anger, and people don't want to talk about that when you're angry, you cuss sometimes. And people don't want to talk about, being stagnant in relationships and just suppressing our emotions and our feelings and staying in our comfort zone when it may not even be our comfort zone. We may still be uncomfortable in our comfort zone. We don't want to be there, and, because you're feeling, angry. And, what advice can you give to people when they're on one side of the bridge and they know they have to move through the fire to get to the other side? What is some advice that you can give to someone just to take that first step of moving through whatever emotion it may be, anger, rage, resentment, however that may look?
There has to be a level of urgency and a surrendering and asking for help. Because if you know you need it, and but it could be very scary and even daunting. Well, who will help me? Who's the right person for me? Where do I even start? There's a bit of surrendering and trusting that the person that is here to help you will come through. And there has to be a willingness and that choice to say, okay, I need help with this. I can't do it alone anymore. So it's just that willingness to say, I need help is a huge first step.
It really is. And
Yeah.
feeling that vulnerability to ask for help. And,
Yes.
for those of you out there who are like me, and it sounds like you too, we have a hard time asking for help, or at least there was a time in my life I had a hard time. Now I have no problems with it because I understand the universal laws of giving and receiving. And, so I don't really have as much problem with it as I used to, but I've also diminished those programs, a little bit from
Yes.
my childhood. And it sounds like you have too. And so, Vanessa, this has been great. I've really enjoyed this conversation. How can people connect with you? How can they find out more? How can they find out about your workshops?
Yeah, so I'm online. If you Google Vanessa Alfaro, the Empowered Communicator, I have my website, which is actually vanessaalfaro.co. I'm on Instagram. I have a YouTube channel with some juicy nuggets there. So, I'm on Facebook. So whatever platform works for you, I'm out there. Yeah, you can find me online and, book a call with me. I have, if you go to callwithvanessa.com and want to talk about how the anger algorithm will support you specifically and whatever it is that whatever challenges you're working through when it comes to anger, you can go to callwithvanessa.com, fill out an application and book a call with me. And it's an hour call and it's free. And it's an opportunity to just see how I might support you and help you.
Yeah. Well, great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Vanessa. And for all
You're
of you
welcome.
out there who might be suffering or struggling with anger or rage and you don't know where to go, Vanessa is here. Vanessa is an option. She's putting a call out to each and every one of you to, if it aligns, if it resonates, to give her a call, connect with her. So thank you, Vanessa. I appreciate the energy that you're putting out into the world. Thank you for sharing your story. I know it can be really intimidating to get, especially on a podcast and be like, hey, I was rageful. I was angry. I started a fight. I did this, whatever. These weren't our best moments, but you know what? We moved through them and now we can shine in a new way because we are sharing our stories in a vulnerable way. And that is also allowing others to heal themselves too and to shine their light in a new way as well. So thanks, Vanessa. I appreciate you coming on the show today.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for having me. I loved having this chat with you. I feel like I know we could keep talking. But yeah. And we are all here to shine. This is why we're here, for creation to experience itself in all of its darkness and all of its light.
I love it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
You deserve to navigate your life in alignment with health, happiness, and abundance. To learn more about the services that I provide, including Beyond Quantum Healing Hypnosis, EFT tapping, and the Emotion Code, visit my website at www.theexistentialempath.com.